Welcome to Bad Sydney Crime Writers Festival 2021. It's great to be back in a room with people and not just on Zoom. But if you are joining us on Zoom, hello and welcome. And remember that you can actually send through your questions in the chat box at the bottom, and we'll try to get to those at the end of the session. Just as just a little hands up of who's a writer or aspiring writer in the audience, because that might steer the questions that we're going to be asking. Excellent. I planned well. We like to start things off at BAD with an acknowledgement of country, where we acknowledge the Gadigal people of the Yeowart Nation as the traditional owners of this land and pay respect to the elders past, present and emerging. For those of you who don't know, my name is Andy Muir, and I'm delighted to welcome you to the Dixon Room today for this interview and discussion with Loraine, Sarah, Lynn and Peter. I wasn't going to go with surnames because I didn't test that out first. So there you go. As you know, this is the Fresh Blood session. But first of all, we have to also do a couple of little housekeeping announcements. As you've already seen, we're following COVID protocols at the festival. We're all double vaxxed and we're checking in with our QR codes. This is a little gentle reminder. And we need to be social distanced when we're in the room. And please respect the protocols and any requests from the volunteers that are manning the sessions. We also ask that you mute your mobile phone and don't record the session. If you are taking photos, please turn off your flash. And also feel free to share on social media using @BadCrimeSydney or the hashtag #BadCrimeSydney. Get the word out there so that people that didn't come along know next year that what they're missing, what they have to come and see. Now, we will be having questions from the audience and you guys about 10 to 15 minutes at the end of the session. So if you're thinking of something while we're talking, just remember that you will get a chance to ask. And as I said, if you are on Zoom, remember to just type them into the chat box and we will get to them. So let's get started because we're all here to hear from our authors, not me. And I thought because this is a session on fresh blood and being a new author and those sorts of things. Now that you guys are all published, is it as you expected it to be? Come on, Giggles. Start? Yeah.
Firstly, I just want to tell everyone I'm really hungover. So please be kind to me. I went to the Bad Sydney Crime Writers Festival Danger Awards last night because I found out yesterday I was shortlisted, which was like, whoa! And Chris Hammer, the man at the back with the camera, won along with Gary Jubilant. So yay for Chris. And in his namesake, I got hammered. So, what was the question?
Well, look, it was just a question of, now that you're published, how is it? Is it as you expected it to be?
It was really weird because I was published in the middle of COVID, as some of the other writers in this room were as well. And so that's tricky. And it's hard to break out as a debutante in a very difficult market. But everyone in the crime community has been incredibly welcoming. I'm always just amazed by the people in this industry and how warm and welcoming everyone is and how wonderful my readers are reaching out to me and saying they love the book. So, it's been really weird, but fun.
Excellent.
I don't think I actually had too many expectations. I was so excited just to be getting published, and but to speak about the things that did surprise me, even though my expectations were quite limited. I was really surprised by the amount of editing that goes on after you think you've finished. Books are so collaborative when you get to that part of the story or the process. Prior to that, it's quite a solo sort of effort, as you maybe know. Some of you are aspiring writers or writers as well. The other thing that was really unexpected was the length of time between actually signing a contract and seeing the thing in print, you know, that can be, and you know, that time you're getting slotted into a publisher's schedule. You're also, so you've got to wait. There's plenty of other people ahead and other books ahead. And then there's other things like COVID that might delay things or whatever. So yeah, they're probably two of the most surprising things I've encountered.
Good. I'm going to say I'm living the dream. So my book came out in February this year, and yeah, very long period of time between signing the contract and publication. And I was lucky enough that, so I'm from Melbourne, so I'm sure you all know we just have lived lockdown endlessly for the last 2 years, or it seems that way. But I managed to have a launch where we all had, we weren't wearing masks. I think we were meant to when we weren't eating or drinking, but everyone was eating and drinking and talking the whole time. So I had a really fantastic launch. I think there were about 150 people there. It was just incredible. And if it had been the following week, it would have been cancelled because a friend of mine was launching the following Saturday, or having her launch the following Saturday, and it was cancelled. So I was really lucky. And then I've been to a few other writers' festivals interstate and in Victoria, and some have been cancelled, but I've been to a few, and it's just been fantastic. People, the organisers, the other fellow writers, and so on have been absolutely fantastic. And I've been on several podcasts. There are a couple of podcasts this year, and YouTube channels and radio shows. And I have a friend who writes YA fiction, and she said to me a few years ago, she said, you know, you think your life is going to change after you get published. And she said, but it doesn't. But I'm here to report to Marion that my life has changed. The people that I've met and become friends with, the experiences I've had, from, you know, conversations with readers and so on, I am living the dream. I'm not wealthy. I'll just put that out there too. We don't do this for money, believe me. But yeah, it's been fantastic. So I kind of didn't expect quite that, you know, people talk about it being a roller coaster. It's actually, for me, it's just been up like that. So maybe I'm about to hit the top and I'm going to plummet down. I don't know, but it's just been fantastic. So thank you very much to my fellow writers and readers and podcasters and all of those people who've supported me. It's been absolutely great.
And what about you, Peter?
No, I don't know what to say that hasn't already.
Your book's probably the freshest here. It's only sort of 2 months.
Yeah, October. But I'd already published a book in 2019, which was a non-fiction story about my family. So I had that experience then of, you know, the ride that you kind of go on. And not to downplay it or anything, but yeah, it's an industry and you just sort of, you know, slot in, and it's a big thing for you, but you sort of just walk into a bookshop and, you know, potentially overseas bookshops, and the shelves are just covered. So you go, oh, where am I? Oh, there I am. Or you have to ask where your book is sometimes. The community is very welcoming and supportive and warm. And part of that is because it is a real challenge to get a book out there. So people, you know, they don't forget about that, which is something I felt for both my books. And, you know, I guess for many years, we wonder if our work is going to get shared with readers. So the thought of having it out there and making connections with people, that it's off your hard drive and in people's hands and in their heads is, it's just a warm feeling. And then readers give you feedback, and that's just, you know, icing on the cake.
How has the experience been different? Because you had the memoir first, which is obviously very personal, and then you have a piece of fiction now. Has it been different? Is it
Oh yeah, with the memoir, both books have gotten great publicity. The memoir, people wanted to talk to you about your personal story, and it's more about you. And the book is kind of just something you've done as well. Whereas now there is a sense that maybe I'm a real writer, that I'm a novelist, that I've created characters, scenes, tension. And there is a sense of achievement that I didn't have that first time. although a friend read my memoir and you know, he said, look, what you've actually done, you've executed it, you know, so don't downplay what you've done here. A lot of people wouldn't be able to do that.
Yeah.
But it is a feeling of being almost more of a writer.
Mm.
I don't know if anyone else has.
Well, you're a professional writer and copy editor as well, aren't you?
Yeah, not so much copy editor, but I edit, but not
Yeah.
so much copy. I do other things like, I'll just put in the plug here, things like government reports and captions for artwork and all kinds of things. So what's the question? I've
like
done
it's,
plugged myself.
You know, it's the, you know, you have the day-to-day, you know, writing job, and then you have the creative, and
Yeah.
they are
So-
quite different.
Yeah, so my day job, I don't know whether any of you have heard this, but sometimes it's called grey literature. So I've had this thing hanging over me that for, 25 years or something, I've been writing and editing grey literature. And that just sounds awful, right? Who wants to say, yeah, I write grey literature? So for me, writing this was, an effort and a massive accomplishment when you begin to understand what other novelists have gone through to create something. And both the work, as Sarah said, that people put in solitary time, thinking, oh, am I a fool for trying to write something that anyone might want to publish? And then the collaborative process of editing, which I found terrific because I edit other people's work. It was lovely for someone to edit mine and to get such great input into making it a far better story and a richer, more complex novel. And the editing process was terrific. So yeah, as I said, it was nice to be on the other side of the desk.
Yeah, yeah. And what what was the process that you went through to get your book published, Sarah? Was it a long path, or?
Well, it started with a moment of enlightenment at a writers' festival where I was sitting there as a corporate lawyer thinking I might write a novel, and I just had this light bulb moment where I thought I need to live a creative life. I also need to live on a boat and write novels. And that might sound weird, but my husband is a really experienced sailor. So that was kind of step one, was that really compelling moment where I thought, I need to do something about this and do it now. And we did indeed get a boat within 6 months. We didn't move on board for 4 years because that's life. We have setbacks. So that was kind of the start. But in that 4 years, I started writing my first novel on my weekends. My job was probably a 10-hour day most days or more, and on the weekend. But I managed to squeeze in some time on the weekends to write a first draft. And it was the first thing I'd ever written other than about 10 chapter ones of different books that I started and never progressed.
Yeah.
I don't even know where they are, which is a shame because some of them weren't bad. So that was kind of step one. I then had a really great mentor who I met at a masterclass at a writers' festival, a fellow by the name of Michael Collins, an Irish writer who was shortlisted for the Booker Prize and now has a humdinger of a book out now. But he actually read my third draft and really helped me through it, and I learned so much. And the fourth draft then went out to, actually I think it might have been a fifth, I lost count. That went out to agents, and I have to say my lovely agent Gabby Naher is sitting here in the front row, and she wrote me an email that I'll never forget. It was 2 lines in typical Gabby succinct fashion, and it was, Sarah, I'm loving this, but I haven't finished it yet. Do let me know if you hear from any other agents. And I almost fell over. I was just delighted. I mean, I had Michael Collins' kind of endorsement that what I was doing was worthwhile and had merit. He loved it, loved the pace and so forth. But to have Gabby, an industry professional, actually say it was good, that was kind of my highlight really in the whole journey. And from there, I don't know about everybody else, but once you have an agent, things become quite a lot easier in terms of you know, it's out of your hands about whether how you get a publisher and how that all pans out. So Gabby managed to get me signed up for a 2-book deal. It's funny, you know, your first book, you've written the whole manuscript, many drafts. The second book, I had written a 1-page synopsis that didn't even have an ending, because with my writing, I don't even know who the villain is. I'm very much a pantser. So, as they call it, not a plotter or a planner. But Gabby, you know, God bless her, managed to sell that second 1-page synopsis and get me a 2-book deal. So that was kind of my writing journey into the publishing world.
What about you, Loraine? Were you plotting as you were being sawn in half by magicians?
Yeah, my first job was as a magician's assistant, and my last job before this one was as a marketing director. So I think both of those jobs and all the jobs, the many, many, many jobs in between, have in common smoke and mirrors, which is, of course, what writing's all about. Writing crime thrillers, it's all about smoke and mirrors. And I always wanted to write the kind of book I love to read, but I didn't know how to do that. And I didn't even know it was possible. And I was very lucky to read The Dry by Jane Harper, an incredible debut, when it first came out. And in the acknowledgement section, she mentioned doing an online creative writing course with Curtis Brown in London. And I thought, oh, I didn't know you could do a creative writing course online. Right, I'm going to do that. So I Googled it and found out it was a bit too advanced for me because I was just such a novice. So for every aspiring writer here, I can highly recommend the Writers' Studio here in Sydney do an online writing course called The First Draft. And that's how this was written. And from there, I got into the Curtis Brown course in London online, the same one Jane Harper got into. And that gives you access to agents like Gabby and all the agents at Curtis Brown in London. And one of those agents, Jane Harper's agent, Alice Lutchins, read the book and loved it and said, I want to represent you. And then she got Pippa Mason from Curtis Brown here in Sydney involved. And then, you know, suddenly you're sitting in the boardroom of the Curtis Brown agency across the table from publishers, and they're pitching to me about why I should go with them. It was just such a pinch me moment, like incredibly surreal. And I went with Text Publishing and got a 2-book deal. And this is the first one. And, you know, from go to woe, from first draft. Oh, by the way, little aside, the first draft coincided with me getting ovarian cancer, and the last draft coincided with me getting breast cancer. And I slayed both of those cancers. So, by the way, and then you go through this process. It's 5 years from go to woe for this book, and the sequel will take me 2 years to write. So I'm getting quicker, but I'm still not as quick as some of the audience here, like Anna Downs, for instance, who can just crack the second book out. So good, The Shadow House. So, yeah. And for me, I guess, career highlight so far is winning the Ned Kelly Prize for Best Debut, which just was such a surreal moment too. I didn't expect it. I was amazed to be shortlisted. So to win that just makes me feel really validated that maybe I'm on the right track and writing is supposed to be my career, because, you know, it's not something we know that we're in the right space or not, but apparently I am.
It's an interesting point though, isn't it? Because as you say, like we're being on the right path, and sometimes when we kind of look back at our lives, we sort of see that we have been on some sort of trajectory that we weren't aware of. I mean, do you think that, I mean, all of you have very, very different backgrounds before you sort of became writers or became published. And do you think that that has informed your writing? Is it a part of your writing? I mean, You wanna pick
Well,
that up?
I ended up writing a former corporate lawyer as my protagonist, largely because I needed to write someone I knew how they would think. I didn't trust my imagination. It was my first crack at it. So I picked someone who I knew I could inhabit that mind.
Yeah.
So yeah, for sure. And then she does all sorts of crazy things that, you know, conservative little corporate lawyers like me would never do.
Mm.
But you know, once you're liberated with a new character, with this character, you know, they can do everything, anything you want. You know, as long as it's plausible, or even a slight stretch. Most of our readers are really lovely and kind, and they'll suspend belief for part of it.
Yeah.
And you know, she's having action and thrills and whatnot. But you know, I've always thought lawyers use words to disentangle society's most complex knots. So words, you're always building a narrative. You've got to build, you've got facts, but you've got to build a narrative around those facts to fit what the law is. And it is creative, can be.
Yeah.
So yeah, for sure, definitely.
It is
an
funny how
important-
many lawyers become authors or comedians. They need some sort of outlet.
I guess for me, it's a fairly obvious trajectory to have been writing and editing for other people, to have a crack at doing it myself. And I had always wanted to be a writer from, you know, for as long as I can remember, but you know, I had to pay the bills. And so I kind of fell into the sort of corporate consulting writing. And I really, really enjoyed it, even though, as I said, it's grey literature, but there's something about it I really love. And I think it's that wrangling with words that I love. I love words, I love language. And so, I don't know, it was just, yeah, a natural, but very, whatever reason, multiple reasons, very delayed process for me. I wish I'd been doing it in my 20s, but I wasn't. And yeah, I'd like to think that I've done my 10,000 hours. You know how they say you need 10,000 hours to become a master at something. Not claiming I'm a master, but hopefully I've sort of done some of the hard yards so that I kind of knew if I'd crafted a reasonable sentence or not.
What about you, Peter? Because you've got a background in law and biomedics, and then you have done the masters in creative writing as well. I say,
yeah, you know, just largely similar stories to what I'm hearing here. You know, yeah, I wrote this as part of a master's in London, and I was like the only Australian on the course. So, you know, you walk in as a bit of a Yahoo, you know, this colonial, they kind of don't really take you.
Yeah.
Maybe, you know, you're not a deep, you know, sort of from that literary heritage. I mean, we have a rich one here, but it's not quite, you know, just we're a younger country. But it also was a bit of a strength because I was writing things, I was writing things that were very different to them. So you stood out, and that's something that Australian literature, Outback Noir, can offer. I did a law degree in a honours in criminal law, so I was kind of inspired by.
We won't hold that against you, Peter.
Yeah. I didn't work as a lawyer, but you know, you're reading about evidence and cases and motives, and you know, it's really interesting stuff. And I remember someone said to me, "If you want to make money, don't do criminal law." In that, you know, the clientele is very different to corporate law or even family law from that respect. So I guess we all have a desire to tell stories, you know, that we're big readers, and at some point you kind of go, your imagination starts to race, and you think, "Oh, I can do this," and you've got to hold down a day job potentially and pay the bills. So it usually begins on the fringes. I think most of the stoning I wrote after midnight, and it usually was at the end of the day when things were quiet, and you know, my brain could settle and the words could finally come out onto the page.
Yeah.
So it's just, yeah, very similar stories that I hear from, you know, especially debut authors and many authors, for how it begins and then the trajectory and how it takes off.
Yeah. Have you got an elevator pitch for your novel? a little sort of, can you sort of describe it succinctly?
My book?
Yeah.
I didn't know we were selling it.
Well, no,
Guess
but
we
yeah,
are.
Go for it.
Well, my book's about a small country town in outback Australia where a school teacher is found tied to a tree and stoned to death. So there's a cop that has to come and investigate it. It's sort of it was an idea that came to me when I was living in the UK, and I just sort of blurted it out because I was talking with my wife, and then a few days went by and I thought, I think there's something in that. So it just comes from, throwing ideas around and seeing what sticks.
Mm. Does anyone else want to have a crack at pitching their novel?
Okay, I'll go. So the first son gets killed, gunned down in the street of Western Sydney, putting out the bins. As you do in Western Sydney when you're putting out the bins, you get gunned down. And the second son must step up. So I'm writing here about a Croatian crime family. And the question I asked myself about my protagonist, Johnny Novak, is if you're born into a crime family, can you get out? And the story is also told from his wife's point of view, Amy Novak. And she's a nice middle-class Aussie chick who just happens to marry a gangster. And the question I asked her was, will you stay? Because Johnny is tasked with seeking revenge for his elder brother's death. So obviously the gang violence escalates because the Croatians blame the Serbians, and so it goes from there. And underneath it all, there is a murder mystery. Who killed Ivan Novak? Amy Novak provides the psychological thriller. Is she telling us everything she knows? And Johnny Novak is providing the action thriller as he decides to pull off the drug heist of his life. How was that?
That's pretty good.
Okay.
That was excellent. I'll have a crack. Won't be as good as Lorraine's.
It'll be much better than one that I've come up for all of
Okay,
you.
so disgraced former lawyer. She's had a sliding doors moment in her past, catastrophic incident that she caused. She's escaping that. She's a little bit of a Jack Reacher type character. She can turn up anywhere. In the second novel, she's Whitethroat. She's house sitting in Queensland on the coast, tiny little retirement town, when a woman is violently murdered. But she thinks it's murder, but the police thinks it's suicide. And she's powerfully affected by this death because this person was someone extremely close to her from her past as a child, somewhat of a mentor, an auntie, a mother figure. And she tries her utmost to get the police to investigate. But there's nothing really that she can point to that this is a murder that the police can hang their hooks on. So she goes after it herself. She has her sidekick, who appears from the first book as well, Matthew Torrens, a former Standover man, a gorgeous character that I love writing. He's helping or not helping, whichever way you want to look at it. She's trying to manipulate him. She's trying to be a friend, good friend. She does all sorts of the wrong things. And in the end, she's tracking down a number of suspects, all of whom had a motive to see the end of this wildlife warrior that she called her auntie.
You left out the turtle.
The turtle. There's a turtle in it. So the title is, the death is of Helen, the leader of the wildlife movement in the town. She's trying to save the habitat for an endangered freshwater turtle called the white-throated snapping turtle, hence whitethroat. But don't be deceived, there's more to the title.
Okay, I'll have a go. Joy Henderson is a young girl living in a family that's drowning in lies and secrets. A little girl goes missing from a neighbouring farm, and there's a secret in her. There's a few secrets in her family as well, dating back to before she was born. Lots of secrets and lies, which she sort of deals with while she's young, and then she comes back as an adult to nurse her dying father, and she and her sister decide to wreak revenge for what he did to them when they were young, but things don't go quite according to plan.
Yeah, so we've got 4 very different novels. And it's kind of interesting that you've kind of sat where you have. You sort of have almost 2 sort of more traditional sort of crime stories, and then the other end we have almost sort of crime literary fiction. What made you choose the stories that you've told?
Another crack. Okay, so it's about my husband's. I was married to a career criminal. He was my first husband, and towards the end of our marriage, although he was retired for the entirety of our marriage, he went back to his old gig at the end of our marriage, and he was busted in Louisville, Kentucky with 100 kilos of marijuana. And so suddenly I was the wife of a criminal, and I had to go over there and try and get him out, spend our life savings getting him out. And that was a really surreal experience for me as a nice middle-class Aussie chick. So I think that informed the character of Amy very much. And my current and hopefully last husband is Croatian, and he left school at 14. He was dyslexic and he became a criminal. So obviously I'm attracted to bad guys, but he kind of pulled himself up before he hit 18 and realized this wasn't a great life to lead, and decided to become a successful businessman, even though he couldn't read. So that's what he ended up doing. Bravo for him. And I wondered, I extrapolated. He was the inspiration for Johnny Novak. But I thought, well, what if you're born into a crime family? What if I put him into a crime family? Because Stead's family, by the way, were not criminals. His Croatian family are not criminals, but Johnny's are. So that was the inspiration behind it, and why it all bubbled up in my head and had to be written.
It's the all-important what ifs.
Yeah, exactly. How do you get out if you're born in a crime family? Michael Corleone certainly couldn't get out, could he? But he kind of went from the light, because he was a war hero, remember? He went from the light into the darkness, and boy, did he go into the darkness, didn't he? He just got darker and darker. Whereas I wanted Johnny's character arc to head in the other direction. He's always been a gangster with a conscience, but as he's asked to do more and more terrible things, it becomes harder and harder for him to do that. And he wants to break free from his family, but he's under the thumb of Milan Novak, his father, who is a wonderful character to write. I love writing Milan because he speaks like this, and he just wants everybody to do what he wants.
He's quite the brutal patriarch.
He's absolutely the brutal patriarch. I love him.
Well, for me, I definitely wanted to write crime fiction. I love the satisfying buzz at the end of a novel, a crime fiction novel. I was also pretty burdened by my current job at the time, and wanted to have a lot of fun, and wanted to be entertained and entertain others. In terms of the character, I really wanted to explore a character who had a sliding door moment. I didn't want to write cops. I wanted to write an ordinary person, a little bit like Harrison Ford in Frantic, where they get caught up in something that they can't let go and they must pursue. But I also wanted to have had this past incident that changed her life entirely. And the first book is called Lapse, as in momentary lapse. So it was like a moment in time where you do something, or you take an action, or you make a decision, and your life is never the same again. And in her case, in a bad way, a very bad way. And it's something that we could all do. I'm not going to give it away in case you haven't read the first book, but it's something that could happen to any of us, including myself. And so that was kind of really motivating me. I wanted to explore also her shame and guilt about that. But that's all the thread that runs underneath. The story, again, it's ordinary people who are doing things real. You know, the first book, again, I can't let it out, but these are people who are highly motivated to do the bad things that they're doing for reasons that would probably not surprise you. But they're doing some very bad things. In the second book, again, you have a host of ordinary people trying to get by. But where's that line? You know, have they crossed it? Are they someone who's involved with the death of this good woman, Helen Wesley? So these are kind of the directions I like to take in my fiction. There are cops, and the cops in book 2 are, you know, I kind of like them. They're kind of under-resourced, overworked. Another reason why an ordinary citizen has to take up the cause. And they're good, they're bad, they do mean things, they do great things. So that's kind of the direction I'm taking, I guess. And what inspires me is ordinary folk in ordinary situations, usually in some sort of social context that we all know about. There's a heap of characters in Whitethroat that are devastated by a financial planning scandal, and they're financially up against the wall. They're highly motivated to do something about their situation. There's also mining developers and corporate executives. How far will they go? What about the mayor? He really needs jobs. Jobs means votes for this mining proposal. So, you know, these are all kind of motivations that are out there every day in our everyday world. But of course, in crime fiction, we get to kind of take it that little extra step forward and really play with those ideas. That's so fun.
Do you consider your book to be a crime fiction or psychological thriller?
Yes and no. It's kind of been tagged more as a psychological thriller.
Yeah.
And I know this because I signed a 2-book deal and the contract says book 2 is another compelling psychological thriller. So that's what I've written, apparently. So no, I don't think it falls into the standard crime genre. There is a cop in it, and I'm going to say he does solve some of the crimes, mysteries that are from the past.
Yeah,
and maybe in the
that
contemporary
historic crime, which is kind of underneath everything else that's going on.
Yeah, the little girl who goes missing in the 1960s is never found, and the cop, a young cop at the time, 20 years later, is still frustrated that he hasn't been able to solve that crime. And then there's another crime, possible crime that occurs, and he starts to think that the two might be linked. So I do have a cop in that sort of sense, but it's not procedural in the normal way that a lot of crime novels are, which I love. But I kind of didn't want to write about that. And in fact, the cop's name is Shepherd, and I never envisaged writing a cop. And one day he kind of popped up on the page and I thought, oh, I don't really want you in this novel, but you kind of seem all right. And I thought, I'll just write a couple of chapters with him and see how I go. And I really liked him and the dynamics he has with a local GP. And so he stayed. But he's not the hero as such, and there's some doubt as to what he actually knows and the conclusions that he comes to. So no, it's not a crime novel in the normal sense. No, and I will say I didn't set out to write a crime novel, and but someone said to me, you know, pretty much every book has a, you know, if there's conflict or something like that, there's probably a crime.
Mm.
And so I'm going to start reading books to see whether every book has a crime of some kind in it, or what the source of the conflict is, or the culmination of the conflict, perhaps.
Yeah. Crime
So-
just could be bad grammar.
True, absolutely true. As an editor, that is absolutely true.
Wasn't some of it autobiographically based,
Oh,
inspired?
yes,
Was it
sorry. Yeah, I didn't say-
cathartic.
Yes, so some of the events in this book are real, not the death of the little girl, although I was always quite macabrely sort of fascinated as a girl when I heard that children are abducted and disappear and nobody ever hears of them again. And, you know, of course, it's ultimate tragedy for a family. But there are other elements in the book that are based on my my childhood, predominantly the setting and the family dynamics, and a couple of other things like those of you who've read it, the story of the neighbours next door, the Larsons, is actually true. It happened to next door neighbours. If you haven't read it, hopefully that's intrigued you enough to buy it and read it. Thanks.
Do you kind of consider your novel, Peter, to be procedural?
Not really.
Yeah.
Who told you that?
No, it's just kind
Nah,
of
just kidding.
it's just that kind of interesting thing of like the crime is so upfront. I mean, there's a young woman who's been stoned to death, not with a bong, but actually rocks. And you know, this Greek detective comes to town to solve it but he's also had a history in the town. So in a way, it's kind of almost a kind of exploration of his history as well.
Yeah, I asked that because I've heard it described as a procedural story, and it's almost an anti-procedural story because there's almost no procedures are followed in this lawless town where the detective, and again, was inspired by my own life with Greek Australian background. There's part of that in every book that we hear about. I remember when I was living in the UK, I had a London agent who had read a book I'd written before this, and she said, she put it really simply, agents are good at doing that. She said, I like that you write about important things. And I kind of went, oh, it's interesting that that's resonated with her, and I should keep going with that. So when I turned to write this book, I thought, what more important thing to write about than to write about my own country and try to say something significant about Australia, where we're going right, where we're going wrong. And, you know, something that I feel personal connection to, again, we all have part of ourselves in these books, is I come from a migrant background. My parents were immigrants to Australia. My grandparents were refugees who went to Greece. You see where the country's heading now with treatment for new arrivals, asylum seekers, refugees, and I thought there's something that I might be able to lend my voice to. So I set up this town, this lawless outback town where nothing works and no procedures are followed, and I had a very visceral death that is associated with a culture and a religion. You bring in your migrant detective. There's an immigration detention centre that exists in this town, and that's something that they do have in a number of outback towns in Australia. It's often there kind of out of the way, but also to stimulate the economy. And then you also have tensions with the local Indigenous community, by virtue of the treatment that they've had over many years, you know, displacement of lands, deaths in custody. So I had all these things I wanted to write about, and it was a matter of boiling them down to the individual level, creating characters, a township, and you know, channeling these themes through those particular characters in that story. Yeah. So that's something I was really proud of doing, and which you know, has resonated, at least in the reviews I've seen, with publishers and media outlets in the UK, especially. That, you know, here's a guy who's trying to say something about his country, what we're getting right, what we're getting wrong. You know, not every country is perfect. Every country has its own issues, but this was something about Australia that I felt we'd lost our way. many people have talked about these topics, and I wanted to do it through literature. Beauty of a crime is that it starts that conversation. Things become unearthed. Secrets are found out about people, and questions get asked. So I thought that's a great prism through which to explore topics like that.
Yeah, excellent. It's probably a good point to remind the Zoomers at home that we're sort of approaching the end of the session. So if you have some questions, start typing them in the chat box and we'll try to answer them. And for those of you in the audience, also start thinking of some questions to ask our panel. That's actually a really good point that I wanted to sort of talk about as well, was the way that crime is really useful in dealing with issues. And I don't know whether it's because we're writers and interested, or whether it's just crime is just a useful tool to sort of start that conversation.
I'm hoping it's both, Andy. Certainly, I think Peter put it really succinctly that, this type of fiction is a fantastic way to focus the attention and highlight issues that, we're all aware of. They're kind of there. Are we engaged? Are we involved? Maybe, maybe not. You mentioned the turtle. One of my passions is species survival. As a Tasmanian, we killed all the Tasmanian tigers. 1932, I think it was the last one, died in captivity. There's some absolutely horrific video footage, and I still feel the grief from that. So, I get to write an entertaining novel that puts a spotlight on a really important environmental theme that we grapple with, but not in a black and white sort of. I love the genre in that I don't think anyone's doing anything didactic or preachy.
Yeah.
Our characters
Good way
are
to turn the audience off.
Yeah, like Ralph, the resident president in Whitethroat, is he's completely anti saving a turtle, and even the hero of the novel is ambivalent. But we get to just think about it and all the opposing issues, the complexity, and the intractable nature of some of these issues that we face. It's a great way to explore.
Yeah. Is there a line that you won't cross? Is there an issue that's too big for crime to handle?
I'd probably say no. There's certainly issues I wouldn't handle.
Yeah.
Just lack of experience, lack of background, very middle-class background. Some things I probably wouldn't attempt that others are doing. I'll let others speak on that though.
You're not supposed to kill any animals.
I disagree.
Well,
because
Yeah.
I did kill an animal in my I did, and I didn't know it was a really, really bad thing. I was trying to illustrate how very, very bad the villain was. And at that stage, we still don't really know who the villain is. It's a kind of lurking presence. But boy, I did get some feedback on that. And I have since learnt that you probably shouldn't kill a dog. And in the sequel, which I'm writing right now, one very early draft, Amy and Johnny have a 10-year-old child named Sasha. He's 11 by the time the sequel comes out. And for one moment, I thought, well, what if he killed someone while he was sleepwalking? And I sent off, a quick synopsis to my editor, who just said, "Are you mad?" I mean, that's definitely a line you shouldn't cross. Having a killer child is not a smart move. So back away from that, So I think there are, especially when you are inexperienced, as I am, you do want to be careful. But I am very much focused and intrigued, and I'll go back to the word focused, on domestic violence in this country and how incredibly prevalent it is, and it doesn't seem to be stopping. And so that's a real focus for me for the second book, is and taking a bit of ownership of that as a population, and what individuals are doing to help stop it.
sorry, I interrupted Loraine, but we've emailed about this topic actually, whether you kill the animal, the pets or other animals or not. And I was just in a session with Mark Brandy. I don't know whether any of you have read the others or not, but there are a few animals that get killed in that, and there are a few animals that get, well, there are a lot of animals actually that get killed in this. Some in a very practical sense in terms for the family to survive and eat.
But not gratuitously.
No, hopefully not. No. I don't know. It's an interesting topic, and it's the topic of the debate later today. But I think it's about the relationship that you build up with your readers and the sort of contract you have with them. This is the type of book you're about to read. This is the kind of scenarios I'm presenting to you in terms of people and settings and eras and attitudes towards, for example, domestic violence or the environment or, cultural issues and refugees and so on. Which I think, it's wonderful that we all explore these ideas, both for ourselves and for our readers. But I think we do have a contract with readers, and so I think I probably set up fairly early on in here that some grim things are going to happen. So I don't know, we might have to continue to agree to disagree, but we've had a really great series of emails talking about different things about writing your first novel and what do you do about things like the pet dog or whatever it might be. How far will we go? I don't know. I have to say, I don't think there's anything that collectively writers can't tackle. But like Sarah, there are a lot of things I'm not going to go close to for very similar reasons.
I'll just say quickly, I think, as well as having a contract with readers, you always have to have a contract with the subjects that you're writing about and make sure that they're written about respectively and accurately. So my own experiences in writing The Stoning, was that I was representing a number of different cross sections of the community, vulnerable groups, new arrivals and first Australians. And I was worried about getting that right, In the current climate, it's a hot button topic, and that Australia writers and many countries have a history of misrepresentation and misappropriation. So in portraying these individuals, I needed to conduct research. So I guess what I'm saying is you can write about anything, provided it's researched. Something else that I had to avail myself of was sensitivity readers who read the book to make sure that they were, that group was portrayed sensitively and accurately, and that's something I was encouraged by both, to make sure that I've done it properly, accurately, and also sensitively. So I would encourage anyone who's writing there are some tricky topics. If you're going to write about child abuse or domestic violence or treatment of new arrivals, these are meaty topics. Crime is the perfect vehicle in which to do them, but there is a process that you almost have to follow. And when you get it right, it's very sweet and very satisfying.
Well, it's probably a good point to open it up to questions from the floor or Zoom. Has anyone here got a question? One from Zoom? All right, so this one is directed to Sarah. Was it always your intention to write a series? And was Clementine's nomadic existence a strategy so you could explore different locations and settings? And will she be coming to Tasmania in book 3?
What a lovely question. Thank you, whoever
barrel.
that was on Zoom. No, I didn't set out to write a series. I didn't even know if I would be published. I mean, so I just set out to write something that I was really passionate about or interested or curious about. I think what happened, though, in the course of that book, writing that book, is that Clementine Jones' journey is such a minuscule sort of progression from the very damaged person she is at the start with some really nasty flashbacks that interfere with her life and so forth, to where she is at the end, and even in the final scene where she's finally at a stage where she can actually open up to someone and actually allow herself to have a friend and speak to someone about what has happened. And that kind of arc was really compelling for me to take her to the next step. And even as I'm writing the end, I'm thinking, that is so not the end. And so I wasn't long after that I came up with the next idea. And I kind of thought, well, in book one, she takes up this leadership role of a community organisation. And that is her. She just gets really bored really quickly. And she can't just sit in the back row and not do something. So she's finding herself engaged in whatever is going on. And of course, she's happy to flee wherever she feels uncomfortable, and she's become, the fish bowl, the goldfish in a fish bowl in the little town that she's in. So she flees that as well. And in the second book, we find her elsewhere. But yeah, that nomadic thing, I didn't plan that originally, but I love it. And I could pretty much see her going to Tasmania. I would love to write about my heart, where my heart lies. Actually, that's why I didn't, because it's too close. The second book, I just couldn't set it in Tasmania. It's just too dear to me. So I set it somewhere where we were going to sail to. The very first place we sailed to, that was where I set my book. And I think, but yeah, I'd love to put her in Tasmania. I hope that question might have come from a Tasmanian. Give me some ideas where I could go.
Look,
Anyway.
I just have a piece of paper with words on it. I don't even have the person who asked the question's name. So
as a crime author, you're realizing, and I'm becoming aware of it as well, you're not just building a world, you're building a universe that spans a number of books, potentially a series, and you're going to get questions like that, and you don't necessarily have all the answers because you're not really sure where the rocket is going to land.
And isn't that part of the wonder and beauty of, for me, for writing? I don't know where it's going to end up. I don't know what's going to come out of my mind or why or when. And I think that hopefully if I'm surprised and enjoy what I'm writing, that other people will. But I don't know whether you guys are plotters or pantsers. But
Pantser.
yeah, pantser, plotter, pantser.
I'm becoming a plotter now.
Oh, yeah. I'm a little bit for the next novel, but I think there's just something absolutely beautiful about writing that just suddenly appears on the page that you weren't expecting. So,
and that surprise, you go, where did it come from? Yeah. We have a question from the floor. Oh, look, an author down the back, I believe. I'll just repeat the question for those who are Zooming, and it was about second book syndrome, and if any on the panel was sort of dealing with that or had any thoughts about it.
I'm up to the fourth draft of the second book, which is called The Double Bind. And it's hard. It's actually been really hard because the first book, you've got no timeline. You're free to write about anything you want. And in the second book, if it's a part of a series, there's some things you can't do again. I'm not killing a dog, that's for sure.
I am.
I can't, and I can't kidnap anyone. And I love kidnapping people. So, but I can wander around the park and decide who I want to murder. So that's always fun. But it is much harder, and I'm having to really draw on some hidden, I hope not too hidden strengths to get through it. It's tough.
I have had to become a bit more of a plotter. And I reckon about 75% of the way through writing this, I thought, I think I need to have a spreadsheet that shows who's doing what when, because I've got these 3 time threads and I had to arrange them. In each time thread, it had to be chronological, but I couldn't have certain things revealed in certain time threads before other things occurred in other time threads. So it was pretty complex. I kind of had to map it all out. And I did that at about, as I said, when I was about 75% of the way through. Now, with this, the second novel, I've done it 5% of the way through, and I keep building it. And I wish I could have a huge spreadsheet on a wall that was electronic, because, you know, Post-its and stuff like that aren't going to quite work for me. So I've had to do that. Very conscious of the timeline and the pressure that comes with that, but also quite pleased that, well, it's going, well, for me, I know it's going to be published, unless I do a really crap job, I suppose, because I've got a 2-book deal. But also I have the support of an editor and a publisher. So I've got, you know, a great relationship, same publisher, same editor for the second book. And that's kind of like a, you know, it's kind of like people holding you up, and they keep telling me that it's good and that it's going to be great. And so I'm not so sure that it is good at the moment, but hopefully enough rework and so on. But it's a different, you're in a different mindset, both, and it's double-edged. You have the pressure of having to produce another one, but you also have the other people's confidence, and they're backing you and saying, we're going to do this because we liked this one so much.
We're going to have to probably wrap it up there, unless there's one more quick question, but otherwise we'll just, we'll back up these authors by a round of applause to say thank you.